All right, walk and talk time. So, a little update first. Last week, a wonderful viewer named Abigail gave me a question, and she followed up and gave me another question and told me, "You ready? I can call her Abby." So, Abby, here's your next question. And I need questions from everybody, so send me some questions. Could be about anything. Last week it was about food. This week it's about, this week's question is about reading. So Abigail asked, kind of joking around, I guess she's like in her 20s, pretty much I guess her question was, as an old man of 55, have my reading tastes changed? Yeah, I think they definitely have. As a kid, as someone who wore a younger man's shoes, I started with comic books when I was 8, 9 years old, somewhere in that range, in the late 70s, 1970s. And I read a lot of science fiction. I read a lot of fantasy, stuff like that. My mother would buy me those little pocket-sized magazines, science fiction, fantasy ones. Then I got heavily into Conan the Barbarian, paperback. I think those were like the Ace paperback books. And, watch. And then, I read a lot of those. Then, in my teenage years, I played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. And I read all the Dungeons and Dragons books. When I was 12, I got into Dean Koontz. I think I've told that whole story before. And that kind of was hey, wait a minute. I really like this writing thing. People make a living out of this, doing this. And so, for me, it was a switch mostly to horror in my later teen years. And I read some crime thriller stuff, some thriller stuff. At that point, I didn't really, we're talking the 1990s. So you would find somebody would have I don't know, a Raymond Chandler book or something like that. And I had no idea what independent authors were, any of that, self-publishing was looked down upon and all that. So my taste after my school years into my 20s, especially into my 30s, I started reading a lot more nonfiction books because I had read in one of those writing books from the 90s that don't just read in your genre, read all genres so you can figure out different things from them to make your story unique, something like that. And I was like, let me read a couple of biographies, I guess. Let me read a couple of history books. I always, as a kid, I was always fascinated by World War II. My dad served in Vietnam. So I started reading different nonfiction books, and I was like, you know what? This is interesting. I like this stuff. So I started reading more nonfiction books. Not so much horror as I get older. Some stuff. No science fiction, really. No fantasy, really. So, at this point I'm reading a ton of crime fiction and a ton of nonfiction. And who knows where it will go. I mean, I've read other stuff. I've read cyberpunk. I've read steampunk. I've read some westerns. I've read many other things, but nothing that has really stuck. So, Abby, thank you for the question. Keep them coming. I know you got a couple more you sent me, but I would love to do other people's questions in the middle there too. So, if you have a question for me, armandrosamilia@gmail.com, or just drop a comment on this post, and we will take care of it. All right, until next week. Bye.